I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Rahul Gehani is a partner at Everest Group and a member of the pricing insurance team. He assists clients on topics related to price and contract benchmarking, strategic engagement reviews, and sourcing cost rationalization. Abhishek Sharma is a partner on the pricing assurance team and assists clients on topics related to price and contract benchmarking, strategic engagement reviews, and sourcing cost rationalization. Abhishek's responsibilities include providing delivery leadership on all of Everest Group's pricing assurance engagements. Rohan Pan is a practice director on the pricing assurance team and leads analysis and price benchmarking, partnering to cloud, infrastructure, and security services. He focuses on global rate card benchmarking across 30 plus locations and the ROI impact of various workplace transformation projects. Nirati Sina is a practice director on the pricing assurance team, where she assists clients in price benchmarking, due diligence services, and application solution guidelines studies. Her focus includes pricing and solutioning within the application services landscape. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Rahul.
Thanks, Rafael. Hi, everyone. At the outset, a warm welcome to all participants today. As part of today's session, we aim to cover three discussion points. The first one being a quick summary of the market developments in 2023. What we've seen in terms of buy-side factors, supply-side factors, and the price trend seen. Post that, we'll spend a few minutes on what some of the game changers for outsourcing services are, right? Gen AI, for example, how's that expected to play out in terms of pricing, what impact it's having, and so on and so forth. And eventually, we'll get down into what the outlook for pricing is in 2024. Towards the end of the session, we'll also take some questions and answer, both with some which we've received early on, as well as the ones which we receive through the session as it progresses. Without further ado, if we move to the next page, what are the factors that have shaped buyers' thinking in 2023, right? There's obviously been a slowdown in demand for products and services, right? There's no doubt about it. It's evident now. Now, because of this slowdown, there's a sharp focus of staying within revised budgets. So there's much more of a sharp focus on budgets, cost control, which is shaping buyers' thinking. There is a realization that the talent crunch and the great resignation have definitely eased, because that's reflected both in service providers attrition as well as also attrition numbers within enterprise organizations themselves for technical talent. But I guess the most important part, which tends to be shaping a lot of thinking, is that because of the vendor diversification in the COVID timeframe, 2021, 22, that has been accompanied by a decline in overall satisfaction with service providers, and that has a lot to do with performance, lack of innovation, inflexibility across a number of these things. Enterprise buyers generally tend to be a bit more dissatisfied today as perhaps they were a couple of years ago. So these are some of the factors which are shaping it. Now, Rahul, given this context, do we also see some changes playing out in buyers' decision criteria on deals?
Absolutely, Abhishek. We have seen this play a very visible way, in the way the deals are getting contracted across various categories. To begin with, if you look at, let's say, some of the keep the lights on type of application maintenance or even ADM deals, we observe that while obviously, buyers consider various factors while selecting the vendors, such as ability to transform the delivery model, their overall credentials, the ability they have to provide stable and high quality talent and bring in process efficiencies, the most important factor in almost 100% of the deals that we saw on the ADM side in 2023 was actually competitive pricing. And if you look at it, it's not surprising at all. In an environment where a client faces uncertain demand for its products or services, it is natural for it to put more emphasis on cost management for keep the lights on type of services. And if you look at BPO services, there is a similar story. In about 92% of the deals, pricing was a key factor. Even in cybersecurity, where for consecutive years the client focus has been on getting top quality expertise, we saw the importance of competitive pricing really shoot up this year. In 96% of the deals, pricing was a key deciding factor. In fact, the only category where pricing is not in the top two criteria is actually systems integration, because such deals have a deeper impact on a client's overall business, the overall performance. And in such deals, credentials and quality of solution are the top two criteria, but pricing also comes in close, at number 3. So this is the perspective from the point of view of buyers. It'll be interesting to recap how the year has shaped up for service providers as well. So Nirati, what's your perspective on that?
So Rahul, what we see is that despite the expectations of a slower market, the sector remains largely unaffected when it comes to the bookings reported. In fact, the industry is experiencing notable growth when it comes to the bookings in the current quarter. The growth is particularly striking when we look at the performance of key companies in the sector. For instance, HCL and Infosys, two prominent players in the IT industry, they have both achieved their highest ever quarterly bookings. Additionally, TCS is maintaining a remarkable trend by consecutively, securing bookings that exceed more than $10 billion for the third quarter in a row. Furthermore, it's worth noting that this growth isn't solely driven by small scale deals. The sector is also witnessing substantial contributions from larger, more significant deals, as well as transformative deals. We have noticed a shifting of allocated funds towards various services with a significant focus on enterprises seeking the expertise of service providers to lower their operational expenses. Although I have addressed the key aspects of bookings, I would ask Rohan to provide his insights on the revenue reported by the industry. Rohan, are you seeing the same pattern when it comes to the revenue reported?
Thanks, Nirati. Nirati, interestingly, we are seeing a very contrasting story as compared to the bookings when it comes to revenue growth. And this calls for a very interesting reading. Now, despite service providers reporting strong bookings, not just in last quarter, but for consecutive quarters, the overall commentary is still quite somber. And across geographies and industry verticals, we see a year-on-year constant currency revenue growth for major IT service providers declining. If you see the graph at the left, you will find the revenues across industry verticals for these major service providers, they have been declining. In fact, if you look at telecom, media, this has been shrinking since the last quarter. Now, a quite similar trend when we look at the geographical view on the right. North America is something that is showing a sharper decline for service providers in terms of revenue growth year on year on constant currency basis as compared to other geographies. Now, coming to the reasons, I would say this decline is largely attributed to existing customer base that is shrinking for some of these service providers. Now, yes, there are new deal ramp-ups that are happening, but they're still falling short to compensate for the erosion of the existing revenue base. Now, part of the slowdown might also be attributed to vendor consolidation. Now, in these situations, while the scope of work might be increasing for the winning vendors, it comes with discounted pricing. And now this is largely on account of slow demand leading to enterprise caution. And we also see no major transformation projects that are coming on. So it's not easy for service providers to farm the existing accounts. So that is there. Then there is one critical factor is the pressure to reduce the IT spend for most of the procurement teams of the enterprises, which is leading to tough negotiations on the existing contracts. Now, the service providers, they are facing very stiff pressures on the margins. Now, if we move on, we can observe that how this has impacted the rate hikes in IT services over the last 6 to 8 months. Now, I think this was expected due to the slowing demand. We see the rate at which pricing for some of these key skills, this was increasing over the last 6 to 9 months has decreased. I think in 2022, the story was quite different. Now the rate of increase is quite muted, especially for traditional application skills, as well as transactional F&A processes, where you can see an increase of 0.5 to 1% or 1 to 2% in some of the offshore regions. Now, if you look at specialized application skills, or maybe cloud and cybersecurity skills, something like containers, DevOps, SRE, IoT. Now, here, there are pockets of demand. We've seen some rate increases to the tune of 1 to 2%, but this is nothing as compared to what we saw in the previous year. Now, I think pricing being of the utmost important in the current environment, with a lot of enterprises looking to optimize costs. So we are offering some complimentary price check and analyst briefing, which Nirati would share some more details.
Definitely. So what we are offering as a complimentary price check and analyst briefing for top 3 levers that have yielded savings for your peers this year. And this complimentary service is only for the enterprises. And the enterprises can choose from any of the 3 functions listed below. It can be either IT applications, finance and accounting, or contact center, for which you would like to get the price check or an analyst briefing. And you can choose out of from a set of 6 countries, you can choose 3 countries. It can be either Canada, China, India, US, Poland, or the Philippines. So with this, I would like to hand over to Abhishek to cover the next section.
Sure, thanks, Nirati. So, good discussion on what the key market developments have been. Rather interesting year. But we'd be amiss if we don't cover some of the structural changes, right? Which are afoot, either in progress or expected to gain speed. What we call the game changers in the industry, right? And some of these could be, the cloud SaaS costs, right? These are rising and it's leading to a lot of concern. So, what's the way around that? Don't even get me started on generative AI and the kind of conversations it's engendering. And then finally, the often talked about outcome-based pricing. So why don't we just cover a little bit into what these entail over the coming few weeks and months. Rohan, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Abhishek. So, Abhishek, you mentioned the word interesting for Gen AI. I would say the word intriguing for cloud and SaaS licenses. I think if you look at the current scenario, the mandate is to control or reduce the current IT spend for majority of the enterprises. So for them, it has really been tough to negotiate and control this cloud spend. And this trend might continue in the further year. So if you look at the commentary in the last 6 to 8 months, you will see, some of the key players, they have increased their license costs, SaaS license costs, cloud costs. You look at IBM. IBM recently announced an increase of nearly 20% in both IaaS and PaaS offerings. Microsoft, as a trend continues, is continuing to increase the prices of some of its key products, Azure, Dynamics 365, M365. Salesforce, for the first time in 7 years, has actually increased the list price across some of its major product lines: Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud. So I think that is a trend that is likely to continue. Now, why is this happening? I think we have to talk about cloudflation here. That is something that is really happening. These costs have been increasing since 2022, and there has been a prolonged impact of inflation here. And this is largely to do with trickling impact of high energy costs. And I think the geopolitics that is happening, that might increase it further. And this directly impacts the input costs for cloud. So we would see these increases coming up in the year further. The second thing is most of these key vendors, they bring out new functionalities in their products, new features, and they're also adding premiums on these products. So we do expect, them to continue evolving and continue add onto their current pricing. The last is, someone like a Salesforce, a Microsoft, or an Adobe. They have a certain positioning in the market, and they want to keep that with respect to their competition, and they want to keep that premium. And that is the why, they really want to. They keep on increasing their prices, sometime in the years usually. So, for enterprises, I would say IT services, the managed services part, maybe is still the best bet to negotiate and optimize their spend, which can be achieved through a variety of ways. Now, one of the focus areas is commercial models. Now, Niriti, we would really like to hear from you, how outcome-based commercial models are gaining popularity and how this can help.
Definitely, Rohan. We are currently witnessing a notable increase in the adoption of outcome-based commercial arrangements. Many enterprises are now asking service providers to put their skin in the game. But what we see is that although we have a lot of proposals in an outcome-based manner, we see a very few percentage of that getting contracted in an outcome-based manner. So, and also let me clarify that when we say outcome-based models, these are not 100% outcome-based models. So it's a hybrid model. A certain percentage of the contract is linked to the achievement of specific results, while the rest of the contract continues to follow traditional pricing structures such as fixed fee or output-based payments. The degree of adoption of outcome-based contracts varies across different types of services, as evident in the slide. So, for example, consulting services are leading the way in the adoption of outcome-based contracts, particularly in scenarios where service providers are responsible for both providing consulting service and implementing solutions such as ERP transformation or digital transformation projects. In these cases, relatively, it's easier to establish a baseline, track the progress, and attribute the outcomes to the service provider's scope of work. However, following consulting is system integration services where we see a significant level of adoption of outcome-based contracts. AMS, application management services, and application development come next in terms of their contribution to this trend. And it's important to note that the depiction here is not about pitting these services against each other, but rather understanding their adoption rate as a percentage of contracts within their respective domains. Within AMS, what we see is that outcome-based contracts are becoming more common for mid-sized deals to larger ones. These outcome-based models often include gain share arrangements, experience level agreements, or to say XLAs, and they are increasingly gaining popularity. In ADVC, outcome-based contracts only in custom development projects where service provider is responsible for a custom application being built entirely. In infrastructure and cloud, however, outcome-based constructs are less common, primarily due to the inherent challenge of accurately assessing the success of these projects in terms of the business value they deliver. The minority of contracts that do incorporate an outcome-based component typically link fees to specific IT metrics. So, so, so if we go to the next slide, we see that outcome-based models are implemented in a variety of combinations depending on the specific contracting parameters, incentive structures, outcome criteria, mechanisms that connect these elements. And to cover these elements can be tailored to suit the unique needs and goals of each contract. Let's delve deep into these components. For example, contracting mechanism can have either provider fee linked to the IT business outcomes, such as enhanced NPS scores or reduced time to market for new products or services, or it can be provider fee linked to client's business impact. For example, the actual financial impacts to the client business, such as increased revenue, reduced inventory cost, or enhanced profitability. The other element is incentive payment mechanism. Again, it can be of two types. It can be either linkage to the provider fee. For example, X percentage of the service fee is paid upon achieving a target of Y% improvement, or it can be, say, linkage to business outcomes. For example, X percentage of share on bringing $Y of cost reduction, revenue increase, growth, or so on. The last but not the least is the linkage mechanism. It can be again different. There can be different linkage mechanisms where which can further define the details of how incentives are awarded or penalties are imposed. It can be either percentage share with an upper cap, fixed incentive, or for incremental tiers. It can be a bonus penalty structure rewarding the provider for meeting or exceeding the target outcomes or penalizing them for falling short. Or it can be in a tiered percentage bonus or penalty structure. So, Rahul, what do you think? What is the most effective way to create an outcome-based model?
Yes, good question. Good point, Niriti. So obviously, not every situation is conducive, to implementing an outcome-based commercial model, And in our experience, we have seen multiple factors, that need to be aligned in order to make the commercial model, the outcome-based commercial models a success. If you kind of look at them one by one, let's say starting with visibility of outcomes. Now, basically, outcome-based models are best applied in scenarios where the end goal is clearly visible and it is measurable, because in the absence of that, obviously it's a matter of conjecture, whether the outcomes have actually been achieved or not, and whether the provider needs to get compensated for them or not. Second is around cost predictability from a service provider's perspective, because while a business case is being made or the initial estimates are being made by the service provider, at least the costs part should be very, very clear. Only then the provider can actually go ahead and provide some kind of a commercial proposal around them. With regard to stakeholder buy-in, the main observation that we have is that the success of these models greatly rely on securing alignment from all essential stakeholders. In majority of the deals where outcome-based models are being considered, we actually see that the models ultimately do not get contracted, because there is lack of consensus among the client stakeholders. And similarly, when it comes to, let's say, baselining of the feasibility, I think the main message is that to ensure accurate measurement of outcomes, it's essential to first have proper baselines. Without that, the measurements that happen post facto, they can be ambiguous or they could be misaligned. Another critical factor is governance. Having a dedicated team, which regularly monitors the performance metrics and the key indicators of success. That kind of a team is a critical necessity. And obviously this team should have stakeholders from both the sides, the client organization as well as the service provider. That is a critical factor in order to make the outcome based models a success. And additionally, I think it's important that the service provider, who is trying to implement such a model, should have prior experience. From buyer's perspective, it's important that the service provider should have done something similar, ideally in the same industry as well, on similar types of projects. Otherwise, it becomes to a large degree trying to figure out at runtime how to make it work. And outcome-based models are complex, so that's not an ideal situation to be in. And lastly, I think, and this is again one of the most important factors, is the relationship, between the two sides. In order to have the right kind of alignment on the shared objectives, what the key metrics are, how those metrics would be measured, the relationship obviously needs to be amiable. There needs to be trust between the two sides, in the absence of which this would not work. So those are some of the key elements that we believe are really important. Let's next touch upon another important element that we wanted to cover, which is generative AI. So Nirti, question to you. At a high level, what do you think is happening in the market with regard to generative AI?
Thanks, Rahul. So, Gen AI is currently generating a lot of excitement, and it's a space that is capturing the attention of both the enterprises and service providers. So, what we are witnessing is that service providers are establishing strategic partnerships with multiple LLM providers. And while this may be viewed as a marketing tactic, it signifies the growing importance of Gen AI in the space. The service providers are prominently highlighting their Gen AI capabilities in their proposals and marketing materials. However, it does raise the question of whether the service providers are genuinely delivering tangible benefits and cost savings to the enterprises they are serving. What we also must keep in mind that it's not just productivity associated with Gen AI, but there is some one-time costs like tuning cost and pre-training cost, along with variable costs like say inference cost or the hosting cost, which the service providers need to bear. Whether these benefits offset the cost and transform into savings in every scenario is the right question to ask. Uh, One can also observe that service providers are emphasizing their Gen AI offerings in specific scenarios, such as fixed price deal renewals or in competitive RFP situations. There are instances where they are leveraging Gen AI as a key differentiator in the market, aiming to stand out from their competitors. The intention is loud and clear. By harnessing the power of Gen AI, service providers seek to enhance their value proposition to clients and prospects. Uh, Nonetheless, beyond marketing and differentiation, it is equally essential to focus on equipping the workforce with the skills and tools to effectively use Gen AI. So, what Gen AI can do is basically raise the quality of the deliverable which the service providers can provide. So, imagine a classroom where there were students of different grading. For example, someone had A, someone got B, someone got C. But using Gen AI, what can happen is that all of the students of the classroom can come at the same level. So the quality of the work would improve. Rahul, what do you think? What are the potential areas where one can expect Gen AI productivity to kick in IT services?
Actually, across the IT as well as BPO services, I think by now there are a large number of use cases which have been tried and tested by various service providers as well as enterprises. We are seeing that the potential impact of generative AI actually does vary significantly by the type of service that one is looking at. Now, I think the interesting thing is that unlike most other automation or AI-based productivity enhancement tools, the interesting part about Gen AI is that while it can help with the transactional or repeatable activities or services, it is also helpful for those services or tasks that involve judgment, right? So for something like application development, where productivity was pretty much stagnant for the longest time, it's likely to have a very significant impact. Various parts of application development, such as code generation, code optimization, test case generation, synthetic test data creation, many others. These all have strong use cases for generative AI. Yes, it also can be applied to a great degree even in application maintenance services or to some extent even in platform implementation. But ultimately, the most significant impact is expected as far as custom application development is concerned. And likewise, if you look at infrastructure services, we do see that service desk is something where there's going to be a pretty big applicability of generative AI. We're already seeing in a lot of proposals, Gen AI elements are being specified. And to a lesser degree, one is also seeing a similar thing happening for some of the other workplace services. Some of the areas where the applicability as of now seems to be low as far as generative AI is concerned is, our, let's say, networking, storage, and compute services within the broader infrastructure domain. And then again, if we kind of move on to the BPO or the BPS category, the largest impact is expected to be in the CXM side, followed by trust and safety, content moderation, those kind of activities. Some of the real transactional services, for example, back-end mortgage operations, that's where again the impact is going to be lower. Okay, Abhishek, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. I think a great summarization, and what brings to mind is what comes back to my mind is the importance of calibration and expectation setting of where Gen AI can potentially play a role. Because you'll recall, a few years ago when we were in a similar space with automation, someone would pick one number that, hey, 70% of things can be automated, and assume that the cost would go down by 70%. It never really happens this way, right? There's a lot of ifs and buts and situations where this is applicable. So the same kind of applies here as well. Okay. Now we've discussed some of those game changers, and at the last section, right before we get into some questions, would be to cover the outlook for pricing in 2024. But before that, let's try and do a quick poll on the next page. All right, so the poll's up. In your opinion, how will FTE rates change in 2024? Let's give the participants a few minutes. This seems to be throwing up something interesting, Rahul.
Yes.
I honestly... Okay, I think we can close it. Yeah. Oh, increased by more than 2%, almost 40% of respondents say that. Honestly, hand on heart, I'd expected it to be for the bulk to be somewhere between kind of, somewhere around the no change or increase by 2%, decrease by 2% range. But the top one is significant. What do you think is driving that, Rahul? Is it cola? Is it something else? Maybe inertia from the previous years?
Yes, or perhaps optimism. If there are a lot of people from service providers in our audience today,
Absolutely.
perhaps optimism as well. I think interestingly, obviously this is interesting. I also was thinking that if we kind of look at a similar survey that we did in our webinar in November of 2022, and keeping in mind that in 2021, 2022, we had already seen price hikes of about 4-5%, and in the case of some of the more advanced scales, close to double-digit hikes as well in rates. The expectation that kind of came across from a similar poll that we did in the webinar last year was that people were expecting prices to actually increase further, let me put it differently. People were expecting the pace at which prices are increasing to actually speed up even more, So I was just looking at that webinar result earlier today. 60% of the people had said that they expect the pace of price increases to increase. Only or about 15% pointed to a reduction in the pace of price increases. I think it's kind of, I'm trying to draw a parallel. The expectation last year was that rates will keep on increasing. They'll actually accelerate. We actually saw something pretty much on the opposite side, as Rohan covered, across various types of IT standard scales, IT advanced scales, even BPO scales. The pace of increase this year has been pretty tepid. So I personally feel, what we are seeing over here in the poll results, perhaps it's optimist. It's like on the side of optimism. With, broadly speaking, 70% of the people are expecting prices to actually increase in some respect. 31% are saying up to 2%, 38% are saying by more than 2%. The number of people who are expecting prices to start reducing is only about 14%. I think the way the market has shaped up, the way it is trending, my expectation definitely is to see either flattish or to some extent even a dip in pricing going ahead. And I mean, there could be a few specific cases where, let's say, clients had been able to sign super competitive rates over the last 12 months, and they naturally deserve a correction as we go ahead. But the broad market trend, I think, would be flattish or on the negative side.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, while these such polls have to be designed at a higher level of abstraction for quick responses, the devil's in the detail. I think this is a good segue into the four factors as we were discussing internally on the next page around how things could so in terms of pricing in 2024, it's going to be contingent on a few things, or a mix of a few things, right? So first off, I think the worsening geopolitical situation now. There was, of course, the situation in Eastern Europe. Now there is a conflict in West Asia. I was just reading that that could further have implications on the global economy should it, God forbid, overflow into other regions. So that's going to be something definitely to watch out for. Another element which often acts as an enabler for sharper pricing, price reductions, overall dips is what we call vendor consolidation, right? If everything is, a host of suppliers are brought into a competitive situation, fighting one against the other, if I may use the term, it's very natural for someone to get the bigger part of the pie. Purse strings will open up in terms of giving a better deal, and that has an overall reduction impact on pricing. So if there is sustained progress on supplier rationalization initiatives, moving away from what we call piecemeal negotiations, which have a much subdued impact as opposed to a programmatic rationalization exercise, that if there is sustained progress, we could definitely see more towards a dip. Now, these four elements are rather interrelated, and supplier pricing behavior could take a tricky turn too. Rahul, you want to cover some of those aspects as well?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, maybe delving a little bit more on the economic outlook, globally. There is obviously there's a potential for further economic deceleration, at a global level. This, like you said, it also in some ways is related to other factors. For example, if the geopolitical situation worsens, it will have some kind of an impact on the economic deceleration as well. Broadly speaking, this is a very complex topic, and even among some of the top economists or economic research houses, there is really no consensus. But a fair number of analysts who track the global economy very closely, they do expect a recession to hit us in 2024. Such an event can have various consequences on the outsourcing industry. For example, volume cuts. There could be situations where some of the ongoing initiatives, they continue, but then the underlying volumes behind the services, they essentially reduce. There could be a delay in the ramp up of some of the large deals that we have seen a lot of providers sign up in the last few quarters. I mean, we took the examples of TCS, Wipro, HCL. All of these have reported fairly large deals in the recent quarters, and the expectation is that they would obviously ramp up going ahead. But if there is material economic deceleration, then those ramp ups obviously would get impacted. We talked about vendor consolidation. While it does lead to, while it is leading to a discounted pricing in the current context, if there is a economic deceleration, even the volumes underlying those deals could get reduced. When it comes to some of the multi-tower transformative projects, they could go through, let's say, a deferment or some kind of a scope reduction. So, huge impacts which are likely, because of the economic uncertainty, as far as the outsourcing industry is concerned. And then with regard to predatory pricing, that's a distinct possibility, because as we discussed again, while the bookings are increasing for service providers, the revenues are not. The focus from the perspective of buyers is gradually shifting more and more towards cost management because they are uncertain about their own revenue growth potential. Hence, to maintain profitability, they need to manage the costs better. Now, in that kind of an environment, where providers are struggling to drive revenue growth, a natural reaction is to slash the prices in order to win more deals. So, and not just actually win more deals, in some cases, it could also be a mechanism to retain some of the existing clientele that they have. So, I mean, broadly speaking, these four factors, I think, will be very important. And, it's important to keep track of all of these as we get into 2024. Now, what is the outlook that we have, as far as the outlook for the pricing outlook is concerned in the next 12 odd months? So we generally would classify our expectation into two scenarios, depending on how the four factors that we just discussed play out. In the first scenario, we kind of assume that while these factors remain a concern area, there is actually no major change. The current status quo, the current situation remains in a status quo mode. And in that kind of a situation, for different types of services, our expectation is a flattish or a mildly negative kind of outlook. So, for example, if you look at IT standard services, which for clarity includes services such as applications and infrastructure services, including technologies like Java, C++, .NET, traditional compute, and storage kind of services. You would expect to see, let's say, at max a 1% increase in pricing, and in some cases, let's say in some offshore locations, even a mild decline of, let's say, about 1%. When it comes to the advanced services, and this includes things like application development and maintenance using premium technologies, let's say data science, full stack development, or even on the CIS side, services like cybersecurity and cloud migration. Now here, while we do not expect to see a major decline, definitely the pace at which pricing is expected to grow will remain pretty muted. Let's say a 2% increase. And then for most of the BPO services, that include voice as well as back office services such as accounts payable, accounts receivable, purchasing, employee administration, etc. our expectation is that the pricing would again remain either flat or it might even decline a bit by about 1 or 2%. The second scenario, which is going to be which is a more pessimistic kind of a scenario, is that if any of the four factors that we discussed on the previous slide, if they kind of change for the worse, that's when we would actually start seeing material dips in pricing, which could be as high as about, let's say, 3 to 5% when it comes to standard services. For some of the advanced services, and for BPO services, dips of anywhere between 1 to 4%. So that's the broad expectation, the forecasts that we have. Now, Rohan, this is the trend with regard to FTE pricing, and a key driver, for the deal value or the TCV is obviously productivity improvement, which providers are able to bring in into a particular deal. So how do you think 2024 is going to play out on that dimension?
Yeah, absolutely, Rahul, you're right. The key driver is those productivity gains over the years. This is one area I think we've seen a tectonic shift from the last 2 or 3 years. And earlier, from 2017 to 22, as we've displayed here, I think 40 to 50% productivity benefits over a deal term of 5 years, they were table stakes. You had every deal, everyone was accounting for those benefits, largely accounting for some automation levers, shift left levers, continuous improvement. And this is a period when you still had a lot of Gen 1, Gen 2 enterprises where a lot of low-hanging fruits of automation were yet to be realized. However, what we've seen is things have been quite different lately. A lot of these levers have been exhausted. A lot of these enterprises are no more Gen 1 enterprises, they are Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4 there. So who have already realized the benefits of automation. So you don't have those kind of levers to actually enforce those kind of productivity gains. And that is why you see net, we've seen a reduction in the automation itself. And that has seeped on to the productivity benefits. As you can see, we've seen like 20 to 25% benefits in the last 1 year over a 5-year deal term. In fact, if you look at infrastructure services, for example, the RU rates, which were declining constantly over the last few years, now they're quite stable. They have really plateaued. And that is something now we are increasingly seeing. In fact, in some cases, we've seen them increasing also because of the input costs. So I think that is something that's a major change there. Coming to what can happen is, I think in the coming years, what needs to be seen is how some of the levers that are highlighted in the slide below, they can actually post a disruption in the status quo. Would a low code or a Gen AI lead to another wave of productivity benefits being passed on to the customer? That is something that needs to be seen. As Niriti and Rahul had mentioned earlier, there are POCs that are already happening in this space, and the expectation from many of the enterprises is to see these solutions in their deals and how they're going to impact the pricing itself. So I think that is something happening. In fact, Abhishek, I would go to you only recently. I think you were involved in one of the workshops with one of the telecom giants, and Gen AI was one of the key themes there. Do you want to shed some light on that?
Yes, yes, Ron, absolutely. In fact, it was surprising that while in most proposals or general documents, there was a lot of talk about it. When you actually get into the room, working through each of the solution elements, there is some view on, hey, what could potentially be an upside due to the use of Gen AI. But really, when it came to rubber hitting the road, any commitments, any kind of, something concrete, that was a bit conspicuous by its absence, if I may. So again, and part of it could also be client driven, right? Rohan, as you said, it's both parties need to be aligned to agree both on the impact, the calibration, and then this whole bogey of data security, data privacy, right? How things are handled, where does the data come from? Till that time that gets solidified, I think the widespread adoption is going to be some distance away. So again, I think potential disruption, yes, but how it actually plays out in contracts, how it actually plays out in the real time environments, that's something to be seen. Okay, I think good discussion overall. We wanted to use a few minutes before we get into the questions, into a quick discussion on what each of us think 2024 holds from a pricing perspective. So in terms of if we were to pick one theme, right, and this is me speaking to my fellow panelists, what would it be? Nirati, would you want to go first?
Thanks, Abhishek. So for me, what I think is that while outcome-based model is on the rise, we must not forget that time and material still forms a sizable part of the deals we see. What would be interesting to observe is, will Gen AI act as one of the contributing factors in deciding the pricing in future, in addition to the factors we just discussed? Uh, will service providers ask for a price increase because they have trained their workforce to efficiently use Gen AI and hence be more productive and produce a more uh, uh, good quality solution or good quality products? That is for me. Rohan, what do you think?
Yeah, interesting point, Nirati. I absolutely agree with you on that. And I also feel, Gen AI is going to be a major contributing factor. In fact, in the next wave of productivity, we expect, benefits coming from Gen AI, those benefits being realized. And, considering the economic environment and increase in cost pressures, focus on cost optimization, Gen AI can really help both the enterprises and service providers to achieve savings. I think next 6 months would give a clear picture on the quantum of these benefits. And these benefits are not just limited to savings, it's also limited to gains in productivity for the enterprise employees. So it's not just about the FTE productivity, it's also about the productivity of the employees. So overall, there has to be a business case that has to be made a little further than just IT business case. So I think that is one of the key areas, I think. What do you think, Rahul?
Yep, I would go with I would go with a different theme. So I think where we're going to see a lot of focus in 2024 is the client spend on cloud and SaaS products. First of all, that spend is increasing by the day with increasing adoption. And then on top of that, a lot of these tech vendors, they have increased prices in recent times, like you had initially explained, Rohan. So I definitely expect to see sharper focus on managing these costs, as far as enterprises are concerned. In fact, in the last 6 months, we have come across numerous situations, where buyers came to us for benchmarking their cloud and SaaS costs, products like Azure, AWS, Salesforce, SAP, Microsoft, Viva, across all of these, as well as several others, buyers were able to actually realize cost savings via better demand management as well as better pricing, and while focus on services pricing will definitely remain, I expect to see a much sharper focus on licensing costs going ahead. Abhishek, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely, Rahul. Great point on software and cloud and SaaS software. I'll if I were to pick one theme, that would be increased maturity of truly getting to a model with outcome-based components. And why do I say that, right? Buyer satisfaction with suppliers is at an all-time low. And as supplier consolidation exercises move forward, what I believe is it's going to be a survival of the most commercially attractive, right? Enterprises are likely to prefer 3 good things happening on the ground rather than 30, which remain totally on paper and fancy verbiage. So what I linking back to the outcome-based components part, in most cases, right, outcome-based would mean that a part of the fee is payable when certain outcomes happen, right? It's in very few cases, very few services where a huge chunk, or it's you get paid only if the outcomes are achieved. No, that's not the case. I think the maturity also means knowing when such a model can be applied. What are the right metrics to link it to? What are the requirements? And the comfort within buyer organizations that, hey, if those outcomes are achieved and overachieved, there could be a bonus payable as well, right? So overpayment should not pinch them if the supplier has overcommitted, over-delivered on their commitments. So what we're seeing is that over the past many years, there's a lot of talk about outcome-based pricing, often with some flawed assumptions, which often leads to heartburn for both parties. I see over time, this has started to kind of come down the right path, and 2024 could actually usher in a high degree of maturity in using these models. All right, let's take some questions. Rohan, would you want to?
Yeah, absolutely, Abhishek. I think one of the questions was around what are the pricing trends observed in cloud services now? I think that's an interesting question now. Cloud services are quite vast if you look at it. And in some of the pockets in cloud, if you talk about containers, SREs, those kind of things, yes, we do expect it to increase, but not in the same range as Rahul previously talked about. It may be 1 to 2%, 1 to 3%, depending upon the economic environment. But these are some of the skills that are still, there is a demand-supply mismatch in the market, and there can be a certain premium on that. But when we talk about standard IT cloud resources, I think it should be pretty stable. There should not be much change in the pricing. There should not be much increase. That is what I feel going into the next quarter or the next 2-3 quarters. And depending again, as the scenarios that we showed, if things turn for the worse, yes, certainly there can be a huge impact on that.
Yeah. I think there was. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there was one more question. I think that was to do with Gen AI and how much Gen AI conversation is really high, and what are the challenges that enterprises may particularly face when deploying AI solutions. And I think we talked a lot about Gen AI during the conversation, and I think I get the point. It can people talking about hype, maybe metaverse did not pick up the way it had people expected it to, and maybe Gen AI turns out to be the same or something around those lines. But I think that we see a lot of POCs now happening, and I think the next 6 months that are crucial to see what really happens, how service providers are building these benefits. I think one of the challenges is about building those impact for Gen AI. Are service providers ready to take those calls upfront? And also one of the things is sharing of cost. Are there who's going to share the cost of building that Gen AI platform? Is it going to be shared by enterprise and service providers together? Who's going to do that investment? That is also one of the key things, apart from data privacy and data security concerns that you mentioned, Abhishek.
Okay, I think we're at the top of the hour. So Rahul, maybe we can quickly cover the ending slides. We'll get back to folks who've asked questions one-on-one. But just before we close out, a quick reminder that Everest Group assists procurement teams in capturing value from their services spend, both through memberships as well as projects across the outsourcing excellence and pricing analytics as a service program. So do feel free to reach out in case we can be of any help on that.
Yes, and people might also be wondering what is the source of all of the pricing insights and guidance that we share in the webinar. So we work with a lot of enterprises in the pricing analytics as a service model that Abhishek talked about, as part of which we not only share our benchmarks or intelligence with the clients, but we also get a lot of current information on their pricing, as they are signing up new deals or as they are renegotiating the existing deals. And we have coverage of more than 300 FT roles, more than 150 resource units in close to 50 locations across the globe, covering various BPS, IT applications, as well as infrastructure functions. And this is not restricted to pricing only. As you can see on the in the orange box, there is a lot of coverage of effort ratios, solution insights, SLAs, so on and so forth as well. So for more information on this kind of a construct, and if you would like to be a part of our membership program, please reach out to me or Abhishek.
Right. Thank you so much.